Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will wait just a couple of minutes before we can start with this introduction. Okay, I think we're ready to start. People are still joining. Just 10 more seconds.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I am having some technical difficulties. Unfortunately, Dr. Hassan, I might have to hand you over the microphone right away. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Hinda Liepmansan. I am the Executive Director of the Middle East Solar Industry Association. And I'm very pleased to invite you all to join us today on this very special edition of one of our webinars. As mentioned in the previous presentation, we are the Middle East Solar Industry Association based in Dubai. And we have been in operations for about 15 years. We host regular live events and online sessions about very important topics affecting the region. And today we will be discussing the latest Abu Dhabi regulation. So to start with us today, I'm going to ask our first speaker, Mr. Rahul, to start by giving you a little bit of an update and an overview before we can continue with the actual panel discussion. Thank you so much. Mr. Rahul, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. I just want to start by taking everyone through what the new framework actually talks about and what we can understand the market signals are possibly going to be. So the current framework is more like an announcement of a policy that will come in the future, but it does gives us some guidances into where the market may be headed, as well as some things have been very explicitly also clearly defined. So, what are the things that have been clearly and explicitly defined? In the previous regulatory environment, residential solar was effectively suspended. You were not allowed to do residential solar in Abu Dhabi, and specifically talking about Abu Dhabi. There were net metering regulations that were introduced in 2019, but they were suspended after a time being. So no new applications under those regulations were being entertained. There were still solar applications, but limited distributed solar participation was there. There was no formal uh, approval process. Everything was assessed on a case-to-case basis. So how the new framework now differentiates from the previous regime is they have formally recognized distributed photovoltaic. Now, photovoltaic plus batteries are also explicitly permitted. Residential solar is also now permitted in Abu Dhabi. Industrial self-supply is also being processed. People who are in the market are already aware. But operational guidelines will be announced in the near future. Right now, a framework has been announced. And this was announced on 5th February. Another thing that has been clearly mentioned is about net metering. So exports are not automatically permitted, while all the projects that were being developed in Abu Dhabi were essentially being designed for self-consumption. Now this has been clearly and explicitly stated that exports are not automatically permitted. However, there is some pathway for future exports to be possible under a controlled and licensed manner. We will have to wait for the actual guidelines to come out. They have not been explicitly disallowed, but our interpretation and understanding is that most projects will have to rely on zero export and self-consumption first economics, which essentially also leads to sizing projects conservatively to ensure there are no excess production which is being not utilized within the premises itself. So these are things that have been explicitly and clearly mentioned in the policy. Now we'll come to things that are more of a inferences and judgments based on what we are reading, but ultimately they will be firmed up once the actual implementation guidelines are held. So what the framework also explicitly states that the government wants controlled deployment of solar. The framework repeatedly emphasizes on grid reliability, operational security, cost allocation. This is an important word, equitable cost allocation, as well as avoiding unbridled growth. So essentially, the government wants to protect the value of existing infrastructure. The government already has gas, nuclear, even utility solar generation assets, as well as transmission and distribution networks already built in place. So the government wants to ensure that there are control mechanisms built around it so that all of those don't become stranded assets. So some of the keywords mentioned in the framework are demand charges, controlled export rules, as well as network implementation zone prioritization, different types of tariffs that may be implemented. These are some of the ideas that have been explored in the framework. And one thing is also being explicitly stated that any new solar, distributed solar for battery has to be aligned with electricity planning, cost recovery, and infrastructure utilization perspective. So one of the biggest takeaways that we as a company and maybe as an industry can take, that tariff reforms are essentially coming. They are on the way. The framework states that utility scale solar is essentially lowering the short-term marginal electricity cost during the daylight hours. So there is a clear and immediate basis to optimize tariff so that it reflects evolving system economics. So maybe a just a flat tariff throughout 24 hours in a day does not do that. There have been references to time of use tariffs in the framework, which essentially means they could be different tariffs based on different time zones. We'll have to see how it is structured. The framework also mentions that the consumers may have a path to choose either to install distributed photovoltaics or photovoltaic with battery, or choose some sort of a load management pathway that the utility may present. One thing that has also been repeatedly referenced is the importance of end users adopting energy efficiency measures prior to investing in renewable energy. So basically use the energy that you are utilizing effectively and then deploy renewable energy technologies, either distributed photovoltaic or photovoltaic with batteries. So we'll have to see how the policy shapes up, but these are some of the signals that we can take away from the current framework. One other important very applicable point. This is not essentially in the framework document, but it is in the consultation annexure, which is attached to the framework. So I believe the policy was circulated internally within various government stakeholders, and there were some comments which give us some idea on where the DOE guidelines where they may ultimately end up going. So there has been references to a self-supply committee, which will essentially assess generation licenses. Smaller projects most likely will have simplified pathways to approvals. Larger projects may get into the self-supply committee review. We don't know the exact thresholds. They will be defined by the self-supply committee, but this is our understanding that less than 5 megawatt projects may face lesser scrutiny or review, and bigger projects, which may be more than 5 megawatt, may go through this self-supply committee. But again, this is our understanding. It could be completely wrong. We'll have to wait for the DOE guidelines. Another important point which has been mentioned is the network investment zone. So the government may define some areas as network investment zones and prioritize solar there within Abu Dhabi. EVEC participation has been specifically referenced in defining these network investment zones. So the idea behind these is obviously in areas where there are congestion, a lot of demand congestion, transmission infrastructure is not able to keep up with the demand, etc. There deploying solar will take a lot of load off the network. So maybe solar will be prioritized there. So again, all of this we have to wait and see how this is operationalized in the actual policy. So what can we do about it right now with the information that we have? So as developers and asset owners, as I mentioned previously, right now I think we have to assume that we have to design systems based on the principle of self-consumption first and no export. We may also show load data justification on why we are sizing projects the way we are sizing, to show maybe we'll have to do some measurements, etc., of the actual demand pattern in a factory, and then design solar around it. And of course, adopt conservative sizing methodologies to ensure that we don't design systems which are exporting a lot of energy into the grid, and essentially all that energy is being curtailed. The same things also, I think, apply for EPCs and consultants. There may be also enhanced protection requirements. In Abu Dhabi, we're already seeing in solar projects, we have more, let's say, protection requirements than in some of the other Emirates. And that is, I think, by design. The government wants more safety, and they want to ensure that they have full control of the grid. For investors and large consumers, what will or may change is we need to ensure that they account for the regulatory review process, especially for larger projects. The regulatory review process may take a little bit more time and may also require a little bit more technical due diligence than, let's say, smaller projects. And also, there could be pathways for adopting PV plus solar instead of just PV as a different business case altogether. Yeah, so that's about it from my side. This, I think, gives a brief preview of what the policy is and where the market would be headed or where the regulator could take the policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So again, we've had a lot of people joining us since we first started this call. So this gives me another opportunity to kind of reintroduce this panel and give room to this panel discussion after this really interesting introduction by Mr. Rahul Anurag, who joined us today. He's the Head of Business Development Solar Projects at Voltas. Thank you so much for this, Rahul. This was a great way to kick this off. You are now being joined by the rest of the panel. So I will start with Mr. Valantis Mikrommatis, who's the Vice President for Key Account Development at Yellow Door Energy. Hello, Valantis. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, MESIA, for organizing.
Also here with us today is Mr. PJ McCloskey, who's partner at MCC Economics and Finance. Hello, PJ. And finally, sorry, go ahead, please. And finally, last but not least, our moderator for today is Mr. Dr. Hassan Ali from the University of Birmingham, Dubai. Thank you so much for joining us today. I will leave the floor to you to take us through a discussion. I want to encourage the audience present with us today to ask some questions. We will be picking up a couple of them at the end of the call. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Hinde. Hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks, Hinde. And so we're going to start with questions regarding this whole new policy. So I'll start with you, Rahul, based on the presentation you had. So you partly answered my first question already, but I want to ask the second part of the question is that how regulations like this would help evolve the market in the future?
Thank you, Dr. Khan, for the question. So the regulations like these are essentially very important to streamline market adoption so that all stakeholders are aware of what to expect while designing, permitting the project. So it essentially shortens the time cycle that is required while doing a business development cycle, sales cycle, proposal design cycle, even during detailed engineering of projects when everyone is aware of what exactly is the regulator expecting, what are the constraints around which we have to build and deliver these plans. So regulations like these are always welcome so that they define clear boundaries and benchmarks on what is expected out of projects that are being delivered. So that definitely is a positive signal for the industry. And we hope once we have the actual guidelines, we'll have much more clarity on what to expect.
Thank you. Thank you, Rahul. So I'll be asking Valantis the next question. That is a sub part of and more focused aspect of the initial discussion we had so far. And that's how future policies in the same direction could help maintain the momentum and how such policies can be made more effective.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Let me take a step back before and just mention my appreciation regarding the regulation. I just came back from Oman. There was Oman Sustainability Week. It kicked off yesterday. I think it's running until tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And Oman as a country is a country that has experienced the absence of regulation. So there's a lot of chatter in the market about when this regulation is going to come and how will it be defined? What would that regulation entertain? So we need to be thankful that there is a self-consumption regulation in Abu Dhabi, and we're here to share our thoughts and say what would make it even better. So usually when it comes to the future of the market, there's a couple of points that need to be streamlined first. I will touch on the fact that licensing and permitting, which is the administrative element of any kind of regulation needs to be streamlined, maybe centralized, or maybe even digitalized, if I can use that word, which will help a lot. Self-consumption is welcomed. There's a lot of energy-intensive users in Abu Dhabi, but we would also welcome to see some form of net metering with clear boundaries, with no caps, like we see in Dubai and Shams Dubai, which is something that took the market with a bit of a surprise in 2022, and maybe some introduction of a more structured time of use tariff where you can see energy storage playing a significant role, and in a way that the business model could allow for more profitability. Um, Last but not least, and I think this is already happening, is some targeting on specific markets. There's a lot of agricultural land in Abu Dhabi, a specific carve out of the policy in order for all these agricultural sites to benefit would also be helpful. And we're quite an ambitious bunch in Yellow Door, so why not also see some offsite solar or wheeling, as we call it, in Abu Dhabi, where basically the simple definition is installing a solar plant at a distance from the site and using the existing infrastructure that exists in the Emirate in order to transmit the electricity to that site.
Thank you. Thank you. Very useful. I'll be coming to PJ for the next question. What sort of self-consumption models could evolve, and what sort of bankability considerations are expected out of this policy?
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. My pleasure to join everyone on the call today. So, in terms of the business models and bankability, let me start with the fact that at a very, very high level, self-consumption is a very different commercial beast than other types of solar economics that are out there. And so the dominant force here is the ability to self-consume and the value of that self-consumption. And we can go into a lot more detail on this in terms of different customer types, different tariffs that are being displaced, and so on. But in terms of the business models, they all reflect that. So at a high level, the customer can now own and finance their own solar. Of course, that might suit the biggest customers who are prepared to take on that responsibility and take on the burden of that upfront. And of course, here one thing worth mentioning is the use of batteries as well. It does change all the commercial models as well. But in terms of the broad strokes, customer owned and customer financed, the most simple, maybe, but the most heavily dependent on customer financing being available and customer expertise being available as well to size the right project and so on, and decide whether they need and benefit from a battery and so on. Then you've got different options after that in terms of taking less responsibility as a customer. So getting a developer, for example, to finance the solar project and potentially leasing back there might be better from a predictability standpoint for the customer. Now, they might not get as big a return, obviously, if they don't take as big a risk in themselves. But of course, it's potentially an easier option there to have that sort of lease model. The other model then, slightly different, is to have a power purchase agreement, of course, for behind the meter project. And then a slightly different model again would be having energy as a service type of model is also another option as well. If there's suppliers out there that provide that service in Abu Dhabi, they might be more dominant now in the future than they were in the past. We also would say there's like a portfolio type of option that's potentially opening up as well. Maybe not in terms of aggregating across sites, but more so, but in terms of the customer side. But in terms of the financing side, the aggregation model could open up a little bit here, where the financiers or the developers can take on a lot more smaller projects and then aggregate those. That makes things more commercially viable from their perspective, even if the end user and the end customer still has the same self-consumption benefits at a smaller scale. But I think it does open up that smaller end of the market as well. We could go into the bankability part of your question, Hassan, in terms of what the lenders would look for in any of these projects. And of course, the same things from before in terms of off-taker credit, contract length, and regulatory clarity is really where the bankability hinges on. Curtailment risk, equipment quality, and so on. But in terms of what this is a step change here and why we're having this call and this webinar today, you've obviously got more regulatory clarity there. But does that regulatory clarity change the bankability materially? It potentially not, because as we just discussed earlier with Rahul, the policy is an announcement of a step change in where we were, which was practically a prohibition on a lot of self-solar projects. So that now that's being allowed, but it's also an announcement of further details still to come. And that's where the bankability will be looking for those extra details there in the future. So I think regulatory clarity is stepping in the right direction from the bankability standpoint, but I think there's a few more steps to go as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting. I'll come back to you, Rahul, regarding the design considerations. So what sort of design considerations and innovations are relevant to this policy? And then the second part of the question is that, and how the load-based sizing, the curtailment, and the oversizing risks could be associated. And then Valantis, maybe you want to add some opinion about it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hassan. So on the load-based sizing, essentially, when we're talking about designing projects in Abu Dhabi right now, our assumption is no export. So that means any energy produced which is not being consumed immediately will essentially be curtailed and not utilized. So that's essentially, you are investing money in an asset that's generating power, but not essentially utilizing that power. So that complicates sort of the initial sizing, let's say, practicalities. We essentially have to look at the consumption pattern of the client. So not, let's say, if a client has a demand load or a connected load of 10 megawatt or 5 megawatt, that does not mean they are consuming the 5 megawatt constantly 24 hours a day. For example, a factory may be shut off on like Saturdays, Sundays. So there the load may drop to a few kilowatts, 100 kilowatt, although the demand may be 5 megawatts. So the challenge is, how do you design solar in such environments? So you essentially have to look at the minimum daytime load, if I have to put it very simply. And how do you do that? We have to install measurements like metering devices in the client's MDBs, etc., and then look at the trend. Obviously, we can't do that for a year. That will, the whole advantage of deploying distributed solar is that it is rapid, it is quick. We can deploy multiple megawatts very quickly. So we can't take a lot of time doing the study, etc. But based on the electricity, monthly electricity consumptions, and some 1 month, 2 month, or even 15 days consumption, hourly consumption trends, we can extrapolate that to arrive at like a particular client's consumption trends and try and match the solar generation profile to restrict export. Here, another challenge is, when you say restrict export, that does not mean 0% export, because in most of the time we've seen, if you want 0% export, the sizing may drop to essentially something which is not meaningful to the client who wants to install. So typically a range between 3 to 5% export essentially being curtailed will give you a meaningful capacity which will be significant enough for the end consumer as well, for him to see benefits either commercially or for green credits, etc. So that is primarily the technical challenges associated with zero export design. How do we model that in the design phase itself?
And just to add on that, but batteries would add value in this context as well, because the policy does
Yes,
cover that as well, right?
yes. So there is a world in which, let's say, I am doing 1 megawatt, no load, no export solar, but the client can take maybe 3 megawatt solar and 1 megawatt hour battery as well for obviously a larger, let's say, green electricity share of his overall consumption. But here the challenge is, of course, when you're adding the battery, the costs go up on unit economics basis. So there is a fine line that we as an industry have to figure out, obviously based on the regulations, to see what tariff reforms, etc., come in. But yes, that could very well be a viable model as well.
Very
I
interesting.
think,
Valantis, you have-
Dr. Hassan, if I may add really quickly, and Rahul has mentioned all the points, there is also an element of pushing design teams to the limit when it comes to the Abu Dhabi self-consumption regulation. Optimization is key. There's a longer time spent at development or pre-development stage in order to identify the correct sizing, mostly because of the considerations mentioned by Rahul. And I think it could be a differentiator about how different companies out there could size the system. At the end of the day, self-consumption, the easiest thing that you could do is size based on the rooftop space, but that has nothing to do with reality, especially when you get the data, and especially when you experience the absence of data, I would say most of the times. And so the pre-development phase is both costly on the meter installation side and timely, but technical prowess and optimization is key. And this is where so companies like us, which have been doing it for the last 10 years, could show that sizing is very important when it comes to Abu Dhabi projects.
Thank you, Valantis. So I have this last question, and then we can go back to any other comments or questions of the audience. So, and this is for everybody, for all three, whoever wants to chip in. In the light of this policy, what sort of commercial viability impacts are expected? Is it going to go better or worse, whatever? And then the financing and ROI strategies are expected out of it. Again, it's very open-ended, leaves you to go in any direction. Thank you.
Yeah. Happy to share my thoughts on this, Dr. Hassan, in terms of the commercial viability. And we actually did a bit of research on this in particular and published a report on our website, albeit a year or so ago. But it does give anyone that wants to look at the commercials some good insights there in terms of what it looks like for self-supply, but more generally, maybe broader than self-supply as an upside in future. So have a look at that if you're interested in some of the numbers. But I'll give you my high-level sense of things. I think to answer the question, yes, this does help. For example, residential wasn't allowed before; it is now in scope. So and residential also has the higher tariff level for the expats. So and on the self-supply side, that's where the unit makes the biggest return. But of course, from the commercial side, although the tariffs are lower, so you're not saving as much by self-supplying yourself. That's where you've got the scale, and that's where you can potentially, as a commercial customer, benefit a lot more from the midday costs that you might be incurring, for example, on cooling costs, for example, for electricity. In terms of the returns overall, there's massively different returns for different types of customer. mostly because of that tariff differential between different types of customer. If you're the benefits here, the economics here, because it's a self-supply policy, not an export policy, comes entirely from your savings on supplying yourself, and so that depends on what your existing tariff is. It also depends, obviously, on your existing usage and your existing profile as well. And one other point here on the batteries that you mentioned, Dr. Hassan, was a really good point that you brought up as well, was because what we're seeing in the financial models is that we're trying to take into account all the different aspects of individual consumers to try and reflect what the return is, given all those different perspectives. The guys mentioned the sizing and so on. But because batteries are now in mix, sizing becomes quite a lot more difficult to get to optimize. And of course, some customers don't know exactly what their profile is or what their future uses might be, and so on. And they may not want to spend extra money adding a battery. But what we're finding is that the battery does improve the economics across the board as well. So if you had a 20% return just on solar panels alone, properly sized and optimized, it might be 25, it might be 30% return. Once you add that battery into the mix, yes, you have to spend more money, but overall it's a better investment. And if anyone else knows investments of that sort of magnitude, do let me know, because those are really good. However, because it's self-supply only, you have to be able to utilize, to achieve those sorts of levels, you have to be able to utilize that energy at the right time in your production and in your retail or commercial activities. So those are the big drivers between the commercial viability across the different types of consumer. And of course, the policy is very excellent to not overburden the grid with excess and surplus generation, and the policy is very careful not to create an overwhelming demand for distributed solar, not just from the grid perspective, but from the maybe an incumbent generation perspective as well. So that's why things like the network innovation zones, and that's why there's different elements to the policy in terms of thresholds and the option, but not the default to export, subject to further permission and further clarification. So hopefully that helps people sort of read between the lines in terms of the commercial elements here that are in play. Of course, our paper last year focused on why is there just not more solar in Abu Dhabi, and we tried to answer that question in some detail. And this obviously policy does change that perspective, and it does increase, and we will see an increase. But it is an incremental step forward, not a leap or and which I think is sensible. Like no one wants to run before they can walk, and so on. So this is a step in the right direction, and the commercials are, the underlying economics are there, and the commercials are just complicated to work through for end users. And maybe just one more thing in terms of the export element. Some projects might hinge on that. If yes, we can self-supply, yes, we can benefit from that. Yes, our return might be 15% if we do that, but that's not enough, or 10% is not enough, or whatever it is. But then even when you add the battery and it improves a bit more, I think the optionality and the potential for export approval, I think, has some benefit as well. So I think that's where that would be beneficial to take that into account, that optionality and the obviously the positive signals that the policy is changing.
Okay, thank you. Anything, Valantis?
Doctor, I just want to mention, since you're talking about commercial viability and maybe not restricted only to the tariff, because we tend to dwell a lot about the tariff. I think there's also the sustainability benefit that some of the energy intensive users in Abu Dhabi are benefiting. Don't forget that there's companies out there, either steel or aluminium, that they're moving towards exporting to regions where CBAM regulation is strong. And a lot of their sales, if we want to talk about that in plain business language, is purely dependent about how green their product is. That's something that could not be calculated in a tariff.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
to
No.
say and to add on what PJ is saying, I'm quite sure the stakeholders, the DOE, ADIO, and everybody who were very helpful with putting this regulation understand how cost efficient distributed energy is and the potential of adding it to your roof.
Yeah.
I think we should all agree that what we're doing as a solar industry is complementing what it exists out there. We're here to support the industry. We're here to maybe, if I can use the commercial element, reduce the costs, but by no means we're not here to fully replace what already exists.
Thank you. A very interesting comment, Valantis. I was trying to stay away from this green aspect because we were more focused on policy in the discussion, but that's very pertinent. One of the largest projects in the world have happened in Sharjah and Abu Dhabi, plus the battery and supplying gigawatts of continuous power, green power. And that complements the energy security, reduction in the grid emission factor of CO2. I mean, the country as a whole has a very decent, emission factor compared to the other partners in the region, with good nuclear reliance on the natural gas, no oil, no coal, and now solar penetrating gradually with this kind of policy. I think the emission factor is really going to trickle down, and this will have a very useful impact with the emerging regulations like CBAM and other factors to keep the industry competitive in terms of the embodied carbon, estimates wherever they are accounted for. So these are the co-benefits that are normally not accounted for in the spreadsheets for now. But once carbon start to trickle in, the carbon tax started to come in, these will be very valuable numbers, and they might have a value that we have not accounted for as yet. So we should keep that as a offset package that will complement and benefit in the future. But again, it remains uncertain. But we keep that as a tool to hedge our risks as well.
An
So
absolute last intervention, Dr. Hassan. Of course, installing solar on your roof will get much more higher rating according to all ESG principles than buying carbon credits from a different source, let's say.
definitely, and easy to quantify, and credibility would be much better. So this brings us to almost to end of our discussion. I would open it for all three participants if you want to add anything that you want to add, and then we shall go to the questions by the audience. Rahul, anything you want to add? Something left out?
No, I'm good. I think we had a good discussion. Just I think we're all waiting for the actual guidelines to see where the market evolves.
Great, great. So, Hinde, do you want to pick up questions or something I can do? You're muted. Sorry.
Please feel free to select some questions that you think are relevant for the participants. We've had quite a few come in from the beginning, so we can get through as many of them as possible. We still have some time, so go ahead.
Sure, sure. We got this one question on wheeling, as Valantis mentioned. Are there any already some renewable energy projects, the wheeling provisions in federal level and in Abu Dhabi or Dubai?
I mean, at this moment in time, Dr. Hassan, there's no commercial and industrial wheeling project per se. I believe at some point in time, there were some announcements. For example, the Museum of the Future, due to the fact that didn't have um, uh, rooftop space due to its unique structure. It is powered by solar at some distance. There's always exceptions to the norm, what I'm saying, and I know we're talking about Abu Dhabi and the Museum of the Future is Dubai, but per se, there's nothing. There's no tangible examples that we can use, and we can say that this is an off-site or a wheeling project at this moment in time.
Thank you. I think we missed that, but it's a very pertinent question. So I would like Rahul could answer that. Are there any megawatt capacity regulations limits to the installation of self supply? And also, will this new regulation apply to fully off-grid PV plus battery microgrid projects in Abu Dhabi?
No, as far as I'm aware, this regulation is only talking about projects which are interacting with the transmission or the evacuation infrastructure. So maybe off-grid projects may not fall under this. And secondly, about the capacity limitations, we have to see the actual implementation guidelines. But currently in Abu Dhabi, any project is allowed to do self-supply. They have to go to DOE, apply for a generation license. Projects less than 5 megawatt typically are called an instant license. They are granted immediately without a lot of paperwork within 5-10 minutes essentially. And projects above 5 megawatt need either a development or a self-supply license. And the process is a bit more complicated and a bit more time consuming. So current reading of the policy and our understanding is that maybe projects more than 5 megawatt will have to go through a self-supply committee. Maybe the 5 megawatt is just our understanding, and the thresholds will be defined in the guidelines. It could be 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, 10 megawatt. We don't know. But this is also sort of being reinforced by the fact that certain projects we know that are less than 5 megawatt have received generation licenses since the policy came out. So maybe that is the direction where the regulator regulations are heading. But we'll have to again wait for the actual guidelines to see what kind of thresholds, if there are any, come into picture. And also another interesting point is maybe there may be some provisions which may allow net metering or export because the framework does not explicitly say you are not allowed to export. So maybe most projects may not be allowed to export, but let's say maybe some projects in priority zones, network investment zones, etc., may have that provision. We don't. Let's wait and see.
But we don't want that to come with a cap, Rahul.
Good. Thank you, Rahul. So we got this sort of fundamental question, but it's good to answer for everybody's information. What is the application and approval process of rooftop installation? And the subsequent question is there any approved contractor list for rooftop installations? That's more of an EPC question.
Yeah, so I can take that. There is a approved contractor list. The idea is similar to, I think I saw the question similar to Dubai, but the approval process is fairly bit more complicated than in Dubai. But we hope these new implementation guidelines also help streamline that process. So I believe most of our questions will be answered once the actual implementation guidelines do come in. But as of now, there is a approved list of contractors, etc. in Abu Dhabi.
Thank you. Let me find any more questions we have. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We just have had one more question about how this regulation could be sort of looked at from other emirates, because with solar the challenge is that when you move from one emirate to another, everything changes, and that sort of brings some complexity in the understanding as well. So how do you view this in comparison to other Emirates like Dubai, maybe Ras Al Khaimah or Sharjah?
I mean, I can start with that, Dr. Hassan, and I think the team is can add. Um, it's no secret to say that Dubai was at the forefront. They have two schemes running right now. The Shams Dubai scheme started in 2015, the D33 scheme for specific industries. Abu Dhabi is following with self-consumption. Sharjah is working on a regulation at this moment in time, and the Northern Emirates are running on a 10% total connected load regulation with a cap on the overall megawatts. Um, there, there's a lot of talk about having unified regulation.
Mhm.
The complexity comes in that there's different electricity authorities for these emirates. And there's also a inherent need from an energy economics perspective, and I think PJ is more suited to comment on this, on how different emirates are transmitting power or are interconnected between them, both within the UAE and both with neighboring countries. I think it's going to take a bit more time to see a unified regulation. I think we're not there yet. Uh, I think other Emirates who are lacking could benefit from both what Dubai and what Abu Dhabi is doing right now, and with a few roundtables and maybe with the help of authorities like the DOE and other industry bodies, there could be some lessons learned on how we can help other Emirates roll out a regulation that will be helpful for all.
Thank you. Very useful. And also, one more nuance to this is that different emirates have different generation capacities and the demands as well, and they need to balance it in the day and the night as well. So whatever regulation that they're looking at, they need to look at their very contextualized needs as well from where they stand from, and then develop regulations out of it.
And I'll
Uh,
say it, the different energy mix too at an emirate level.
yeah. And the mix comes later, but the demand and supply is quite different for different emirates as well, and each emirate is quite unique in their needs and sources as well. So it's quite interesting.
It's obvious. I mean, it's no secret to say which is the largest emirate, which emirate has the most industry, and the list goes on of considerations and parameters.
True. Uh, One question. Do you recommend postponing mega projects until it is completely designers or stakeholders? I don't know what the question means, but the mega projects are going on quite aggressively. We've had significant announcements in Sharjah, in Abu Dhabi, solar independently and along with the batteries. So that doesn't make any sense.
I think one thing we should clarify is that this policy is only, I think, applicable for distributed photovoltaic and not like for utility scale photovoltaic that is going on in UAE.
True.
The 50
That's
megawatt commercial industrial could be a mega project for our industry.
In that case, we don't recommend postponing that. I think permitting, etc., can still go on if that's the question.
true. And Valantis, you mentioned D83. If you can just elaborate that briefly, what
Yeah,
that was.
D33 is more on the net billing side, Dr. Hassan. So it's targeting specific industries that I think the government of Dubai realized that are up and coming, manufacturing, agriculture, and data centers. I think it's a very welcoming scheme. It allows for that cap to not exist and selling the excess electricity at a rate that is considered that has been commented that is pretty low, but the removal of the cap that is there with the Shams Dubai scheme definitely makes it a more welcoming scheme for these industries. I think since we mentioned data centers, maybe it's good to ponder a bit on the fact that the inherent issue, let's say, with powering data centers is land. surrounding it and installing solar. And of course, the health and safety requirements that come at the back of installing panels on the roof of data centers. So I think that is something that could benefit from a bit of an enhancement. There's a lot of data center valleys in Southeast Asia that are coupled together and powered by solar. That sits more towards a arrangement that is much closer to offsite solar. That is additional components that you can add to regulations. But in general, what I have to say about E33 is that it's tackling sectors in industries that haven't benefited from renewable energy at this moment in time.
Thank you. So I think
So we
that's
have one more question that came in, that came through. I think we have time for just literally one more, if you want to ask it.
which one, Hindi?
From Dr. Lichin.
Oh,
about-
sure. I mean, I'm not sure if we can answer that clearly, but it's for everybody. How much consultation did DOE carry out with developers and installers as part of the policy making process for this new policy? Rahul, maybe?
Yeah, so I believe we've also, I think, been internally discussing this. The consultation that happened was with various government stakeholders, not with the industry stakeholders. And this is for the industry to probably change and try and make an effort to maybe have some consultation with DOE before these policies are finalized. So maybe I think PJ can elaborate a little bit on that, or maybe he's doing some work on that already. But yeah, that ideally will be a good direction to go into.
Yeah.
PJ, you have anything to add to this?
Yeah. Just to say, there's probably a big opportunity here for developers, installers, in the industry in general, and people on this call, and people who are your members, Hindi, and of MESIA and members of Solarabic, to contribute to this space, to help the policymakers weigh the trade-offs, understand the impacts, help them draw the boundaries, help them regulate for growth and for return and for mutual benefit. I think there's a massive opportunity there for us all to play a role in that, more so now than ever, and to push the policy forward. And yeah, I think that's a fundamental point there going forward.
Okay, great. Well, I think this is it. We actually managed to get through all of the questions. I wish to thank you to the panel, Dr. Hassan, fantastic moderation, Mr. Anurag, Valantis, and PJ. Thank you so much for joining us today. To the audience, to our partner powering this webinar, Solarabic, for supporting us continuously, to the audience for joining us today. Please, I encourage everyone, we have 2 minutes here. I will do a little pitch about the Middle East Solar Industry Association to let you know that we continuously organize events, both live in various areas, a lot in Dubai. We have one coming up on smart cities. We are currently in the process of selecting speakers. So if you have input on the topic of smart cities, I encourage you to visit our website to find out more details about this. We also have an upcoming webinar about Algeria. And for more information about our programs and how to join our association, I encourage you to visit our website, www.mesia.com. And we hope to welcome you at some point in the future at one of our events. Thank you so much, everyone. We're grateful for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.